think we're live. Or
Now
we're
we're
live.
live. Yeah.
Yeah. Misan, when I said Happy New Year, what did you say to me?
What the fuck, New Year? Honestly.
It's been an interesting
Honestly.
Christmas. So we had the season of joy, peace, and goodwill to all, marked by the US deciding to bomb Nigeria. And then we had New Year, marked by Trump deciding to invade Venezuela and kidnap the president and his wife. Yeah,
Uncharted territory. I mean,
it's
I'm rarely left speechless, but I think a big part of this whole sit down for today with you and I is probably going to be Venezuela. And I know you're quite well versed. You wrote beautifully about it really quickly. Thank you. Because
thank you.
because I had to get my head around it, because Venezuela has been in and out of the public discourse for many reasons, but it's always been there. It's always been there. And your article, which it's a last post you did on Substack.
Yeah, it's my last Substack post.
Yeah.
I wanted to remind us all that while this is unprecedented, there are many precedents for the US conducting illegal attempts at regime change, and that there are two main things to say about that. One, every time the US violates international law and another country's sovereignty to instigate regime change, it damages the system that keeps everyone safe, including the US, because you just have to think, what if China decided they didn't like Trump, decided to make up some charges, invade, arrest him? Like, that might seem far-fetched
or
now.
take Taiwan.
In a way where unipolarity is inevitably declining, that is the precedent America is setting. And the second thing is that even if you assume that America should do things that are unconventional in its own interests, every single time it invades another country and instigates regime change, it ends up damaging American interests. So it's not smart. And you know what it makes me think of? It's like this entire US administration is like the kid in the playground that beats everyone up to steal their lunch. And for a while that worked. You get everyone's lunch, but everybody hates you. You will never have an ally. You will never have a friend who has your back. And the best example of this for me and what America's doing right now, which maybe we'll come to, is not even Venezuela, it's Greenland. So I don't know if you saw that Stephen Miller's wife was like, Greenland next. Stephen Miller, one of the most influential people in the administration. Trump's already talking about how we want Greenland next. Denmark is one of the US's most loyal allies. When the US decided in another illegal invasion to start a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, Denmark, just like the UK, jumped up, offered troops. They put Danish lives on the line to stand by the US in that illegal war. And now the US is treating Denmark like it treats Russia or like it treats Venezuela. We want Greenland. We're just going to help ourselves to it. And it means next time the US needs an ally, what's the incentive? Because you might do whatever they ask and they'll turn around and try and violate your sovereignty too. So in the long term, to say it damages US credibility is such an understatement.
Credibility. I like that.
Like, imagine a world where the US had credibility. This would be the best way to ruin what was left of it.
Yeah, I mean, every single thing you said, I think it's been. I'm trying to find Claire Daly's tweets she did about the fact that Spain is the only country that has in the EU that has made a statement that is worth calling a statement. Everyone else has capitulated. Every single.
So I'm just going to add to that. I've said this before, but you know that my background with Keir Starmer is working with him in a chambers that was founded on principles of international human rights law. That is his entire career's body of work, is a legacy of working within the parameters of and deeply respecting human rights law. So the fact that when this, which by the way, I have not heard, not even on the right, a single legal expert, not even a legal expert, a single person who's ever understood anything about law say this was legal. Some Republicans support it, but they're not saying it was not legal.
It's completely illegal.
There's no case that it was legal. No one is trying to say it was legal. But for Keir Starmer to not be able to come out and say that was illegal, when it is basically like, if you were to study law, that would be class 1 of what illegality in international law looks like.
It's been interesting. The world we live in now, because obviously you and I have lost our minds watching how awful the press have been in regards to Palestine and Israel over the last 2 years. But what's been really interesting is that they have been really quite on it with the interviews with Keir Starmer, which I think is very interesting. You know, I just saw Laura Kusenberg and somebody else, and they were saying the things you and I would ask him. And I was like, that's interesting.
It is
Because
interesting.
it goes to show the do not enter seems to be only about one particular nation. I'm just.
Do you know what I think it is? I think that the UK is a small island that has felt safe because it has sucked up to the US for
Mm,
the entire 20th century. And the idea that Trump can switch on an ally like Denmark, as well as help himself to a country within what he describes as our sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere,
mhm,
i.e., we do what we like here, this is our backyard, is making even conservative commentators in the UK feel very nervous. And I
mm.
have to say, like, there is nothing conservative about this US presidency. This is a radical presidency. He is ripping up the entire rulebook of how you conduct international relations, how you build respect on the world stage, how you get stuff done. And he's also not even interested in sounding sensible, because let's all remind ourselves that in 2025, he gave a pardon to the president of Honduras, who was convicted of the exact same drug trafficking charges they are now laying at Maduro's door. So if this is a regime that cared at all about drug trafficking, they wouldn't be pardoning convicted drug traffickers, right? So you can't even pretend that this is about protecting Americans from
But he's
cocaine or
not.
whatever
He's
they've
not
said it is.
pretending. I mean, he's talking about oil in the first press conference. He's not even pretending. I think the reason Trump is such an extraordinary vessel for this madness is the chaos theory of having the head of the most powerful nuclear powered nation in recorded history be utterly shameless. You see, you can't when you are that shameless. He is, and they call him Teflon Don, right? You can't touch him because there's nothing you and I can say that he will care about. And when you have 800 plus, you know, US Army bases around the world and more lethal killing power than any nation state, and you have a head of state that is now utterly shameless in a post-truth world.
Here's the problem for Trump. And you tell me if you think this is naive. We both know America. We've both spent time in America. We both know many Americans. In my opinion, Americans believe in America.
Mm,
And for all of the things we can look from the outside and critique America and see that it was founded on genocidal violence and
mhm,
racism and
mhm,
enslavement and all of
mhm,
these wrongs, it doesn't mean that the idea of America, the Constitution, the promise of the better life is something that Americans get up every day believing in. Americans who serve in the military, and I know some, believe in America. You know, there
mm,
might be people in the military for all kinds of reasons, but there are many people because they have been told and they believe they are fighting for a better world
mhm,
and that they are protecting a nation that they love that stands for, and you hear Americans use this language, leaders of the free world,
mhm,
the
mhm.
guardians of democracy, right? Now, I'm not saying that I agree with that, but I'm saying this is what, in my opinion, many Americans believe. It is very difficult to mobilize Americans around the ideal of America if you are so brazenly corrupting and degrading the idea of America. And you're doing it with no shame. So while in the short term, we're all watching and being like, wow, in a way, there's almost a refreshing transparency about it. Because you look at previous American actions in Iraq, in Iran, I mean, the list goes on. It was about oil, right? It's been about oil. But, you know, we would have to have a long conversation establishing that it's about oil and not about the things that America said it was about. This one, Trump's like, it's the oil, guys.
Mm.
So thank you for saving us the time, President
Well,
Trump.
I
But the
mean,
problem is that people in America, I think it's making it very much harder for them to believe in the project they have been raised to look up to with like a religious fervor and level of devotion. And I think that is going to cause a lot of problems. If you want to mobilize America, the American military around ideas that don't make any sense, I think that's going to be challenging.
I hope you're right, because this is the first time we've had this um, MAGA cult, and it is a cult. People are so far gone in especially in Trump Mark II that it doesn't, he can't make any mistakes. It's not about right or wrong, and there is, if you look at the oligarchy and what they're doing to the internet, if you look at CBS News, Barry Weiss, listen, this is a full-on takeover. And that's what makes this really, really unique. You know, I'm not trying to defend Americans, but a lot of them haven't got a flipping chance in hell in even knowing what the truth is anymore.
That's true. And that's by design,
But
obviously.
it
And
is,
as we
but it's,
know, opportunities to discover the truth are being rapidly removed or taken over. That is true. But I think, you know, you just look back at the war in Iraq, right? We all remember the lengths that all our governments went to pretend that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, to try and get a UN Council resolution so it had a veneer of legality. Do you remember? And then we had long inquiries establishing whether there were weapons of mass destruction, whether it was legal, whether there was the right UN Security Council backing. Now we're in a world where no one pretends that they believe in any of that. You just go in. And in the short term, it works. But I'm saying in the long term, these rules exist for a reason and they're not altruistic. You know, one of the reasons we have international law is to protect other leaders from this kind of invasion. And people are feeling very nervous.
Afua, did
And
you
I
say
think
that
it's
we
going to
have
backfire.
international law? Did you say we have?
I mean, it's always been an idea. It's like money, you know? They're pieces of paper. They have no inherent value, but if enough people believe in them, they count for something. So yeah, it's a question.
I mean, the combination of this hegemony that everyone's just seeing it in real time. It's happening faster than anyone thought. CNN, one of the first pieces it did outside of just reporting the kidnapping of Maduro, is it showed crowds of Venezuelans celebrating. So, you know, with my reach online, I had a lot of Venezuelans DMing me saying, have you seen how CNN are reporting this?
So I had a really interesting experience on my Instagram. So as you said, I wrote this Substack about it. It was basically critiquing other instances where America's done these illegal invasions to create regime change. And I mentioned Iran, I mentioned Haiti, I mentioned Panama, you know, like Guatemala. There's a long list. And I had Venezuelans on my DMs complaining that I was being dismissive of their suffering under Maduro and minimizing how happy they are that he's gone. And I had quite a few people say, what you're missing is we don't care whether this was legal. We don't care what Trump's motive was. This is good. This is what we want. We're really happy. Don't rain on our parade. And this is, again, why I always turn to history, because I'm not endorsing Maduro. I'm saying processes and rules exist for a reason, and it's to protect us. And I just want, this is my challenge for everyone watching, give me one example of where a leader who is a bully, and by the way, this is what Hitler did. He wanted Poland, he just helped himself. Give me one example of a leader who just helps himself to other nations' resources, violates international law, deposes their leaders, where that has a good outcome for the residents of that country. Just one example where that's worked out well for people. And this is what I'm saying to Venezuelans. Like, I'm not saying it was okay what people were going through under Maduro. I'm saying this will be worse. And that the origin story of what comes next counts. It's going to influence the outcome.
It's so interesting. I had the same messages. And I think this is part of the folly of man. You see, you know, we don't, and you've given many examples. I'll give a few more. I remember when I started seeing how many of my friends from Iran were Zionists and really, really pro-Israel. And I was like, huh. And I have a few Lebanese friends that are like on a strange place in regards to their view of Israel. I have many, many friends from Syria who said, Misan, this is the first time I can go home. I don't even understand how this thing happened, but I'm gonna go home, right? And a brutalized, broken, disenfranchised, traumatized group of people are not, in general, capable to have the level of critical thinking to take a bird's eye view to see that a man with a moral compass that is at least as low as Maduro himself is their savior. And this is the issue where it takes us who have a platform and a voice to hold steady on the truths of all of this. That does not mean the Venezuelans are wrong or right. It's about the ability to even be able to have true critical thinking when you have suffered, your parents have suffered, you've lost friends, you may be starving, you may have been put. How can you possibly? But the one thing I'll say as a Nigerian is we have this term wahala, trouble. Our own wahala is our own wahala, and we have to fix it ourselves. And my friend from Iran, when I said, do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu is your savior from the Islamic Republic of Iran? Because you don't like the current leadership. Do you think Israel is
It's
your
that kind of my
emancipation?
enemy's enemy is my friend.
Look,
Like speaking, since let's bring Africa into the chat, right? This is the other thing I think people don't see. If you are an African person, if you have heritage from an African country, you have skin in the game. I don't know a single person of African heritage who has family who's come from an African country who is not somehow living with the intergenerational trauma of the regime change that former colonizers and the US unleashed on our countries, like the chaos. So, you look at the African continent, there is not a democratically elected president who stood for change and genuine social transformation who was allowed to stay alive and lead his country. The people who were allowed to stay alive and run their countries were the people who were essentially running client regimes for the US, right? Dictators, you've got the Mobutos, you've got the Mugabes, who started out
he broke
as
my heart. That man
who started
broke
out
my
as a
heart.
freedom fighter. But the point is, if he'd have stayed a freedom fighter, he would not be alive. He would have had the same fate as Thomas Sankara or as Kwame Nkrumah. The list goes on. So people who don't know much about the African continent, look at it and see, maybe like Trump, shithole countries. We are still living with the consequences of the CIA and MI5 coming in and deposing regimes that stood for the promise of what would have been in our interest. So we know how this ends. And it's so historically illiterate to think that what might seem tempting in the short term that is carried out through the illegal actions of a deeply anti-democratic tyrant is going to have a good outcome for you. Impossible.
But listen to the language you're using. Look, this is gonna hurt. I'm gonna just have to say it. So many Nigerians, especially the ones in the middle class or even above that, are huge supporters of Trump. Huge,
Are they
right?
still? I wanted to ask you about that because I remember
Huge.
the first Trump presidency and a lot of Nigerians
Huge.
this is what we need, a Trump. We need someone who's just going to promote our interests. Doesn't matter how much damage they do on the international stage, just project our strength. They liked the kind of the ogreness of Trump.
He reminds me
Spoke
of
for so
many of
people.
many uncles I have. He reminds me of many Nigerian men I know. But if, and God forbid, but if this man, Air Force One, landed in Murtala Mohammed Airport, Lagos, Nigeria, we would offer him anything he wanted. I'm telling you, if he came and said, I want to build a US base in Nigeria, you think we're going to... No, listen, this pains me. The red carpet we will pull out for this man, and Nigerians that see this, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me.
I want you to be wrong. I really want you to be wrong. Okay, since you brought that up, let's talk about the Christmas Day, Boxing Day attack. I think it was Sokoto State. No, it was northern Nigeria, the US. It was really interesting because Trump's been threatening to basically bomb Nigeria to protect Christians. I'm not even going to waste time
With Nicki Minaj?
On how little basis, in fact, as we all know that as many Christians as Muslims have been affected by terrorist violence in northern Nigeria. I'm also just going to remind everyone that the chaos in the Sahelian part of West Africa, which is the north of most of the coastal countries, as well as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, was caused by the US's last illegal frenzy of regime change when they deposed Gaddafi, sending his mercenaries heavily armed back to their home countries and fomenting Tuareg rebellions, other rebellions in the desert, joining up with Al-Qaeda, with ISIS, with Boko Haram, and Sardine. West African terrorist groups sprung out of that last US military intervention on the African continent. Of course, when Trump talks about the problems of violence in Northern Nigeria, he conveniently fails to admit the major role the US had in starting that violence. And I'm not oversimplifying it. It's a very complex situation in the Sahel. It's not just because of the US actions in Libya, but that was the spark that lit the tinderbox. And it's been interesting that when the US attacked Nigeria, I've seen the Nigerian government trying to own it and say this was a joint operation. And whereas Trump saying we attacked Nigeria to protect Christians, the Nigerian government's like, we launched an attack to try and destroy terrorism and protect all Nigerians. So they kind of tried to rebrand it so that it's less divisive and sounds less like something made up, because it
They
doesn't
won't
make any
even
sense.
give us visa to go to Niger and to go to America.
Yeah.
They won't even give you can't
see?
travel.
I saw that Burkina Faso and Mali have retaliated and are now refusing to give Americans visas to come to their countries. I wonder if there'll be more retaliation by countries that have been banned by
That's going to
Trump.
be really interesting, especially when it
Yeah.
becomes the sort of places Americans love to go in the summer, right?
Yeah.
It's. I think that may be.
Which, in fairness, Burkina Faso and Mali are not at the
No,
top of
not. But if it was
currently.
Italy and France, I think it could be a very different thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
but
indeed.
it,
Yeah. So, but back to Nigeria. So, what's your take on what that means? And like, surely that is going to change perceptions of how dangerous a threat this person is on the African continent.
yeah, and you know, remember when he years ago called all of us, or all of these nations, shithole countries? You know, I think if Venezuela can happen, honestly, boots on the ground in the great continent of Africa for numerous reasons. A lot of it is mineral wealth. Sometimes it's just strategic positioning, and having, you know, enough proxies in enough parts of the world. You know, Trump has some smart people behind him. You know, chaos theory doesn't mean that there aren't people that have insidious plans that are actually disciplined and are thinking the next 25 years
But it's
behind them.
interesting. During the last Trump presidency, he was the first president in decades to not even have an Africa department in the State Department. He basically wasn't interested in the African continent. He didn't appoint anyone with Africa expertise. He just withdrew. There was no Africa policy in the last Trump administration. There just literally wasn't one. No one was pretending there was one. It kind of didn't exist as far as they were concerned. That's definitely changed. He targeted the African continent with the reductions and withdrawals of USAID. USAID, a separate conversation we can have. It's one of those things where I have been criticizing USAID my entire adult life, but when they just cut it because they say we don't care about Africa, then you start to feel defensive of it. And by the way, again, USAID wasn't benevolence, right? JFK promoted the idea of US aid in continents like Africa because he understood that soft power promoted American interests and gained them access to mineral wealth, right? It was never just some kind of charity because they care so much about African babies. So it's just so interesting that Trump is so unable to think strategically about other ways of achieving things other than just bombing people, that his instinct was to cut it. But anyway, there is much more of an interest in Africa this administration than last time Trump was in charge.
Yeah, so we need to probably do a separate thing on what the full, you know, what USAID going. It's always been a some kind of tool of empire, but it's become so entrenched in so many systems that real human lives depend upon that I haven't got the data to hand. I'll get it for when we do one on this, but the amount of human beings that have died because of this thing being taken away from one day to the next.
And just like that, with no planning,
it
no
is a
transitional period.
Massive number. Like it's a big number. And it leads right up to Elon Musk as well, you know, before they had their little predictable fight. You know, empire, you know, imperialism, you know, all these words were not used that much, you know, even 2 or 3 years ago. People are really waking up to like, oh my God, I thought empire was like the British colony. You know, the sun never set on those days. It never went away. And I really, really think people need to wake up and look at who profits from the American project, right? There has been a bigger wealth creation story than there's ever been in the history of humankind in the last 2 years.
It's interesting, actually. Another observation about Americans is that I think Americans think of imperialism as a European thing. So they know about the British Empire, they know about the French Empire. When you talk to Americans about American imperialism, maybe Puerto Rico, Guam, but they don't think of the US in imperial terms. And that, I think, is maybe a useful learning from Venezuela, is that this is classic imperialism. And there's an origin story to that, because during the Second World War, Roosevelt did not like the European empires. He didn't approve of them. It wasn't in accordance with Americans' idea of kind of globalized capitalism. They saw it as these like massive kind of subsidy rackets that were, and it was true. They were allowing European countries to get, completely unfettered access to resources without any kind of market forces, which made it harder for America to compete. So one of the elements, the big conferences like Yalta at the end of the Second World War was trying to impose on Europe the condition of moving towards decolonization in exchange for US aid in reconstruction. And so I think that created this narrative that America is kind of against European-style colonialism, that it stands for something different. And that has really slowed people down understanding what American imperialism looks like. And Trump is helpfully speeding that right back up.
Right back, because education, critical thinking was the one thing the American educational system did a really good job in hiding, because I believe, and many other historians, I'm not a historian, but many historians believe that the most successful settler colonial project of all is America itself. I can't think of one that has been, the First Nation people of America. The job's done.
And that's another interesting thing, like trying to tell Americans, like they are part of the British imperial story. Like, I come from a country that was colonized by Britain. You come from a country that was colonized by Britain. They don't see themselves in that way. And it's just interesting. Like, obviously, they fought for and got independence from Britain longer ago than Ghana or Nigeria did. But it's trying to understand America without understanding its place in the European colonial expansion project doesn't make any sense.
And it takes 1 or 2 generations. It's really sad. Oh, this pains me to say this again, but how quickly the memories of the erased can just fade. I remember, you and I, similar vintage, you would have probably grown up eating Jaffa cakes. And, I was like,
have some
Jaffa
in
cakes.
my cupboard right now.
And I was just like, I didn't know about the
You're not going to tell me we
with,
can't eat Jaffa cakes, are you?
No. But
Okay,
the port of Jaffa, right? In
Palestine.
In Palestine, with the best oranges in the world, right?
I never thought about that.
And if you just get on Google and look at what has happened to the erasure of that and how it leads to the Jaffa cakes that we eat today, it's Jaffa. The Jaffa cakes. It's just like, the level of this is mad. And I was just a kid eating my Jaffa. Do you think once when I ate a Jaffa cake, I was thinking of any Palestinian connection? And this is a power.
The erasure is very, very, very effective. I'll tell you my one that was a bit of a shocker is Captain Birdseye. Did you know that was actually a real person? And guess where he got the idea for fish fingers from, Misan?
Oh, fuck no. I'm scared. Hit me.
He was in Canada watching indigenous people, how they catch fish and freeze them immediately on the ice, and how the fish retains its flavor and shape when it's frozen immediately. And so he essentially stole that IP, copied the technique, repackaged it as a quintessentially European food, and hence we have fish fingers, or if you're American, what do they call them in America? Fish something else, fish sticks.
Is that what they call?
I think so. You know what? You can't really defend a fish finger either. It's a bit of a strange name. Anyway, but it's so interesting how much of our food is it's like dangling in plain sight.
Yeah,
and then people think that imperialism is like some ancient story while they're munching on a Jaffa cake.
No.
The dissonance of it.
It's everywhere, and I love the ability that we have to go on these journeys and help people. Because once you go down these rabbit holes, it really helps you understand the bigger picture of the ills of our collective past. And on that point, I actually wanted, in our chat earlier, I didn't bring this up, but I have to. bring this up because it's kind of connected to you and your story. I reposted Georgia Poet's
Oh,
beautiful
MBE,
words
MBE. That's beautiful.
on the honor system, and around the end of the year, this always happens, and many people have got in touch with me saying a myriad of different points of views. But I really think, going into 2026 and the world as we see it today, and seeing so many extraordinary people that have come from, beyond nothing to shape a legacy in the world is something to celebrate, right? But how do we celebrate it?
Okay, so it
Um,
is New Year. Most people, when they think of the New Year, they're probably thinking about like getting into the gym and their resolutions. You and I always get a rude awakening with the reminder of how many of our people celebrating being recognized with the language of genocidal imperialism. And every year, there's this list of new Black and Brown recipients of OBs and MBs, and a lot of white people get them too.
mm,
And it's really interesting, actually, like some of the robust conversations I've had with Black and Brown people I know who've accepted OBs
yeah.
have said, but that's so unfair. White people never have to explain why they've taken one. Why should we have to explain? Why is the burden always on us? I just think it's such interesting framing. First of all, there are a lot of high-profile white people who've rejected OBs and MBs for this
Loads.
because they also share the values of not
Mhm.
celebrating or endorsing violent imperialism. But also, it's such a privilege to have in your lineage direct access to the understanding of what oppression looks like. It means that you are already awake. You already have more racial and cultural and historical intelligence. It's been gifted to you.
Mm.
And the idea that you would prefer to slip into a slumber of ignorance where you can celebrate the things that have done the most damage, I just find it strange. I can't relate, Misan. I actually can't relate.
I would rather slowly poke my eyeballs out with a hot spoon. And so many people DM me saying, "Oh, Miss Anne, we love your work. You really should be considered for a nana." I said, "I wish a motherfucker would, hmm? Because the party I'll do to say no, it's
Have you
no, but
not been
it's
tapped up for an OBE yet?
they know better.
I have. I have twice. I have
You know,
twice.
people have messaged me to say, "Oh, we have a little a
That's what
group
they
of
do. They
people."
start
Yeah.
out. They start out with a gentle feeler, like,
Yes.
if we were to consider
Yes. I've
offering
had
you
that,
one,
and I insulted the hell
that's
out of
how
all
it
of
starts.
them.
Would you be minded to accept? And then the response to which is always like, have you read anything I've ever written? Like,
Yes. That's
what?
like, are you high? Eh? But it's one of those things. And I always think about generations of Black and brown folk and how, it's been drilled into us. And it's hard to always judge folks who sometimes think of their parents who may have been Windrush generation and all of those sorts of things. But you're an adult but at this point, at the stage in your life that you should be receiving these things, I think you must have been aware of the ills of our past. And if you're willing to take it, then that's fine. Maybe it's just another tick box in, look at what I have done, right? And I think
Do
the
you know? Do
cults,
you know what? This year I looked at the discourse, and I think there are people like us. I put us both in this category who are usually like, I would never take one of these for these reasons, but if you did, it's fine. Like, I'm not criticizing you.
yeah.
And I think it's really interesting how we always couch our dissent in like, I'm not judging you. And I think I'm going to move a little different this year. I think I'm judging you. I'm judging you. But here's the empathy, though. Here's the empathy. We live in a climate of scarcity, right? As a Black British person, there is a legitimate sense of scarcity.
Mm.
Doors are closed to you, ceilings are imposed on you. It's a hostile environment in every way, spiritually, psychically, economically, socially. It's a hostile environment. That is real. And so I understand why, given that sense of scarcity, people feel compelled to take whatever they can get. I get that. I do. And the thing that really gets to me is that that's by design. The same system that created that scarcity for you is now dangling you a medal. And by the way, if they were offering you land, intergenerational wealth, assets, and you had this plan as to how you were going to use that to build your way out of the scarcity, different conversation. The thing that hurts me is what they're giving you is so little. It's some letters and a cup of probably cold tea at the palace. Like, that's all it costs to buy your complicity in the system. I just think it speaks to how insecure we feel, that we have to take that because there's nothing better for us. And that makes me really sad for us, Miss Anne, honestly.
But it's also the most genius thing because it reduces our most powerful, right? Because if you do accept this, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be as outspoken as we must be about the systems that must be
That's
broken.
also by design, right? They are buying.
That's the real genius part of it, right?
Yeah, it's very clever. I'll give it to them.
You know,
this thing has been tried and tested and developed over centuries. Like, they've nailed it.
I had a old school friend of mine, just an old friend. I don't, before people figure out who it is, but I had a friend of mine who is of color, and he was part of the I think in those days it was called the Prince's Trust, and he's become a very successful man in finance now, and he's like, Misan, I've been following you for ages, and and he's like, but when I started out, the Prince's Trust gave me opportunities.
I have friends in the same position.
That I would never have had.
And just to be clear, the Prince's Trust really has given a lot of Black and brown people opportunities.
Amazing.
Like, a lot of people who've become successful got a grant or an opportunity early on that made...
At an important time in their lives.
At an important time in lives. And by the way, that's the point of the Prince's Trust, now the King's Trust, because now they're loyal, right?
Yeah. So that's what I said to him. I said, listen, mate, I'm not denying. I know many people whose lives were changed, maybe even saved by this because of where they were coming from. But does that mean that you then will lose all ability to critically think about the systems that is part of? It's a simple question, right? It's because we have to live in the world where right is right and wrong is wrong. And if there are systems that different parts of our lives are part of that hold up or reduce our ability to understand why we are here.
The Prince's Trust is to Charles and the monarchy what USAID was to JFK and the US. It's soft power. And that you can't take away that it helps people.
It has helped people.
And it saves lives.
No doubt.
That doesn't also undermine the critique that it is designed with a non-altruistic motive at its core. And both things can be true.
Both things can be true. And also people can grow, right? And actually, I think many of the people who have become hugely powerful that are part of the Prince's Trust could actually lobby and say, what is in a version of this amazing thing that makes sense for the world that we're trying to build, right? And I've seen people say this about, what do they want? Officer of British Excellence? Is that what's been... Excellence,
I really can't get excited about that. Yes, that is the proposed alternative.
That's not enough for Afua. It's
just a rebrand of the same idea. I mean, yes, look, the fact that they actually have the audacity to put empire in the title is the ultimate piss take. If it weren't for that, I'd be critiquing the idea.
We have to give people prizes now. No prizes.
I know, I'm a tough audience.
No, but it's an important one.
Do you know what is that? It's actually deep because I think about this all the time. Okay, so let's just put the empire thing to the side. That is literally ridiculous. That's insane. You want us to celebrate our achievements with reference to the thing that broke our ancestors. Crazy. Put that to one side.
Yeah.
The other issue, and the reason why I'm not excited about renaming it Order of British Excellence, is that I think that we're addicted to the approval of the establishment. Completely addicted. And I think Black and brown people, we're more addicted because we had to work harder to get the approval. We had to work harder to get accepted into this country, to get into the professions, to get into the good schools. And so we have used the approval of the establishment as a metric of survival. And again, I get it, right? Our parents had to work so hard to get into those spaces, but the consequences, an unhealthy dependency on that kind of recognition. And so while renaming it something else makes it slightly less offensive, it doesn't remove the problem. And the reason that is such an unhealthy problem, right, is that when it's time to speak or when it's time to say something people don't want to hear, you fear losing that recognition and approval because you've placed your sense of success and identity as an achieving person on receiving it. And I speak very personally because the things I've done in my life that I'm proudest of attracted zero recognition or approval from the establishment. The things that made me who I am, the things that have reached people, the things that I feel have had the biggest impact on others, that are most in line with my personal values, are things that I would never have received recognition or approval for. And if I had been seeking that, I would never have done the things that I am now so grateful that I did. And I say that to people, it comes at a cost for you. You know, in the short term, yes, it helps open doors, it helps give you credentials, it helps establish your legitimacy. In the long term, it decapitates you from being the person you're supposed to be. That is a huge price to pay for a medal, bro.
The thing I love about you is that the way you speak sense, the way you so what can I even say? I mean, there's no lies told of me. I'm just like I'm at the pulpit in your church, and I'm saying yes. I was like, what can I say? And I get a little emotional listening to you because one day I will speak about my last 2 years, right? And you know my story, and I could have made a very cushy life, just getting from yacht to plane, photographing and just being that guy. You know, you was Misan's at the Met with whoever, right? Misan's at F1, Misan's and ignoring the existential crisis of our times, which is, you know, whether it's Venezuela, Niger, Palestine, Congo, we can go on all day. But I remember, and this is the only, because this is a whole other thing we'll do one day, but I remember about a week after October 7th, I think maybe 2 weeks, I had gone with Oxfam and Christian Aid and a whole bunch of other Save the Children. It was to 10 Downing Street. It was Rishi Sunak was PM then, right? And we did a vigil and we knew what was coming. This is really early days. The next morning, I had a phone call from very powerful kind of hedge fund types, billionaires in this country, saying, and these are not people I know. They got my mobile,
Wow.
and they said, "You don't know what you're doing, and every
That
aspect
just
of
gave
your
me
life,
chills, Misan.
every aspect of your life will be broken if you stay on this road." And it wasn't like there was a discussion, you know, and then, you know, the phone drops.
And they actually like said it like that out loud.
Straight up.
That's chilling.
Yeah. And I've never, because I've been loud about the queer community, climate, black, nobody has called me out for that. But I'm saying this because that's the moment. I have young kids, right? That's a moment where you decide, let me just stay doing fashion film, jejely, you know, let me just enjoy my sweet life. And somebody else can take this thing up. It is that moment. And I know the sacrifices you've made. Like, it is a choice. And and the irony is so many of, talk about our own black people, so many black people that are seen as icons in the British discourse. You know, when it comes down to how willingly they're going to stand shoulder, chest out to try and force change so your kids and my kids can inherit a future that is livable. But let's see how history remembers it. Beyond the pomp and pageantry and splendor, and beyond wealth accumulation, beyond vibes, right? I always say this thing when I do my talks, like, we cannot pass each other by like ships in the night whilst the world's on fire.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are our own people doing beyond?
I think what you said is really important because it's important to acknowledge that it comes at a cost, right? So no one's pretending it's easy. And this is the thing that I say about the OBs and the MBs. Like, in the short term, it's easier to just take the approval and the recognition, feel celebrated for your successes and achievements, feel part of the mainstream. I get it. And it's also scary to go against that and feel personally and professionally threatened, which is the price you pay, especially as a visible Black person. And I would say I think there are different ways in which being an outspoken Black woman is uniquely triggering, and there are other ways in which being an outspoken Black man attracts a unique level of hostility. It's hard. So I'm not being dismissive of that. I'm not saying everyone should just do it. It's just so great. I'm just saying, when you think in the way you're articulating about legacy and values and what the point of your life is, it's difficult to square not doing the things. And I don't say that as somebody who has got it all perfect, by the way. I'm not saying like I've got it, like I'm the one leaving a legacy, guys.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that like when you think that way, it already makes you function differently. And, I know this because a lot of people who don't visibly or publicly move that way want to talk to me about it and are trying to work it out.
Yeah.
And I guess that's all I ask, just that we're honest. And also, if you're taking the OBE, I just ask that we acknowledge what it is. Like the thing that makes me the most annoyed is when people try and justify it like they're actually doing it for Black people. Like, stop it. Just stop that. Do what you're doing for your reasons, but don't pretend this is for the cause, because it's not. Sorry.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this, Afua. You and I, we just started doing this thing on Substack, and we're going to keep doing it as is for now. But you know what? And we've spoken about this, but the idea of you and me having a podcast, observing culture as we see it, it's interesting how scary that idea can be for a lot of people. It's really interesting, and I think about it not just with you and I think about it with Andy Mundy Castle, who's just this brilliant filmmaker, who's made the film about My Life, Shoot the People, and his last film won a BAFTA, and how he won a BAFTA, and he had to go and start from the beginning until I met him, and we figured out a way to make this other film, and he's made, I believe, a masterpiece. And I think there is this thing, and it's America isn't perfect, but the UK has a way of turning some of our most talented folks into basic versions of themselves.
I agree.
In
Hard
order
agree.
to get
Which
commissioned.
is why we need to be free to critique it, because that's what it is. And I don't know what else to say, but yes, and I see it not, and Andy is an example. There's so many examples. You do everything that's asked of you to the highest degree of excellence, and then you start all over again from scratch. By the way, the letters after your name won't save you from that fate. That's the con of it all, right?
Yeah.
They won't.
No, and the brilliance of everything that we are. I mean, that's why independent media is just becoming so important for us. And every time I see a person of color that's trying to build their own platform, I'm like, yes, how can I help to keep doing it? And because, the BBC has its own issues, but we're at the bottom of any kind of importance of the state broadcaster. But I also think all of the commissioning parts of the infrastructure of radio, TV, and film in this country, I don't know how many times I'll have to say this, but I'll say it again on this one. It was Fiona Lamptey, a Black woman, that commissioned my film with Netflix, that was nominated for an Oscar.
Was and is run by another Black woman, Anne Mensah. Not a coincidence.
Yes, absolutely. It was a myriad of Black people that helped get my documentary to a place that it could be made. It was a Black man, Edward Enninful, that gave me my Vogue cover. So, the reality is, like, how many people in industry look like us is very, very few.
And
right?
You would like it to be the case that you could separate the conversation about diversity in the industry and us doing our stuff that clearly has merit, because it ends up working really well. But the reality is that it's only when people like us are in those positions that the doors are open. That for some reason, other people aren't doing their job of seeing value in forms that don't look exactly like them. Which is crazy.
But Afua,
imagine
why is that? If Afua Hirsch comes into a meeting, right, and maybe, I know you too well and everything else, but I'm just like, it's a bit of a home run in terms of the subjects that you would want to do, and you do a pitch. So when you leave that room, what is going on in their head after you've pitched your idea?
Well, I can tell you what they tell me. This is incredible. We think it's going to do really well. It's just not a great fit.
For fuck's sake, still?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. All the time. We move, Misan. I think we should wrap it up. We've been going for nearly an hour. It's a new year. I'm so happy to see you. I love the comments. We didn't even really address.
Oh, no,
Some really
one more thing. Sorry, really, really important.
Okay,
and I just want to, I don't know Anthony Joshua, but I've been so just devastated in all of it, and we don't need to go into the details because everyone has seen it. But I just condolences to him and his of course the family of his two close friends, these two men that were taken far too early, too soon. And I mean, there's a lot that people can talk about fate and where he was sitting and all of those things, but the fact is two men are no longer with us, right? In a really awful way. And I saw footage of Anthony at the mosque at, I think, one of the funerals, and again it was just. And then he did a post with some of the family's members, and I'm just like, may those that have gone rest in eternal peace, but also his mind. I hope he has the right people around him. This is a long journey.
That's like a deep trauma to go through. I can't, on so many levels. Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
No worries. We'll be back. We'll be back very soon. It's been judging by how January is going, we may have to do a few emergency ones. Blumeneck.
Yeah, look out for them. We're still here. We move.
Yeah, look after yourselves.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye.